Hi guys. All right, so I'm excited to start this new series of screencasts. In this, we will learn how to build a Rails application. Okay, so this series is targeted at Rails beginners, and we'll try and understand the proper approach to building a Rails application. Okay, all right. So before we get started, let's take a quick look at the setup. So what I have here is a browser with c9.io open in it. Okay, so to follow along through the series, all you need is a good browser, and you need to sign up for an account on c9.io. So this is a very amazing online editor which provides you with an editor and also a proper Rails environment, so that you don't have to spend your initial time in getting your environment set up properly. All right, so go ahead and sign up for c9.io. There is a free plan available, so it's free. You don't have to pay, and so let's get started. All right. So the first thing you'd see after signing up is this page called the workspaces page. So what you need to create a Rails application is click on the create new workspace button here, and so this is going to load up a bunch of options for you, and so we will create a project now, and here let's call it Iroh. So this is one of my favorite characters from Avatar. So this guy is a very intelligent and wise guy. So what we're doing is building an application which will send us a quote every day via email. Okay, that's what we're trying to build here. Okay, and I'm gonna keep the defaults here and select the Ruby and Rails template. Okay, so this is the template we are going to use, and let's click on the create workspace button here, and what it's going to do is it's going to create a proper environment for us where we can run our Rails application. Okay, so let's give it some time, and once it's set up, we will go ahead and uh, create our application. Right, so this is complaining about Vimium, so I'm going to disable that, um, and it's loading our container. So awesome. So now we have our environment set up, and if you see, it has actually created a Rails application for us. If you look at the left pane, this is the file browser where you can see all the files in our application, and this is a viewer, and down below is a terminal. So this is something which you'll have to get familiar with, uh, where you can run commands and see the output of the commands. So this is a terminal, and the environment which the environment of this terminal is Ubuntu. So this is an Ubuntu computer with all the commands available in Ubuntu available for you. All right, so you can run ls, date, and whatever commands you want to run. Okay, so whatever commands you have in Ubuntu are available here. And if we uh, take a quick look at Ruby-V, you'll see it has the Ruby version 2.3.0 with patch 0. And if you look at the list of gems, you'll see it has a bunch of gems, and it should have a Rails. So let's run that. So gem list Rails, and it has Rails 4.2.5, which is actually an older version of Rails. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do a quick ls, and that's our workspace, and we're going to go one directory uh, above, right, to the root of the namespace, and we will do a quick rmrf workspace. So what I'm doing here is I'm removing all the files, and we will install the latest Rails gem, which is version 5 at the time of recording, and so it's installing all the gems. Now if we look at the list of gems, you should see we have Rails 5 and 4.2.5. So uh, awesome. Now we have Rails 5 installed on our computer. Let's create our application. Okay, so what I'm going to do quickly here is make this into a new tab, move this into a new tab so that we have a bigger screen to look at. And I'm also going to zoom in a bit here so that it's clearer. All right. So, all right. So let's take a step back. Let's first look at what Rails is. Okay. So Rails is a web application framework built on top of Ruby, and actually, you know what? I'm not going to spend time explaining what Rails is, because you should already know what Rails is if you are watching these screencasts. So when you install Rails by running gem install Rails, it installs a command called Rails. Okay, so let's run Rails version, and if we see it, it shows that the latest version of Rails is installed on our computer. Okay, and Rails has many commands available which you can run. Okay, so if you run Rails help, it will show all the commands available for Rails. Okay, so here you see it says usage is Rails new app path, and there are a bunch of options here, and and we can take a look at these options in detail. But right now, I'm going to create a Rails application called Iroh, and I'm going to use the database PostgreSQL, right? Because this is a very good database. And we will also use one option where we will skip sprockets, Spring. Okay, so Spring has caused a lot of issues in the past for me, so I'm gonna skip Spring. Okay, so you won't lose a lot, but let's see. All right, so what it's doing now is it's creating a directory called Iroh, and it's installing all the gems in our application. Okay, so let's refresh this view. Okay, so there is a slight problem here where this guy, the editor, is expecting a directory called workspace, and we don't have a directory called workspace. So I'm going to quickly rename the Iroh directory to workspace, and then we'll start off building an actual application. All right. Okay, so let me close this and close this pane. Okay, so it's installing all the required gems, and what we can do here is so yeah, we'll wait for it to install all the gems, and till it installs all the gems, let's actually take a look at what we are going to build. Okay, so this is an application called Iroh, which is something which I wanted to build for a very long time. Okay, so what I want this application to do is, there are lots of things you learn in life at various points, and then you forget them. Okay, there are lots of wise sayings, wise proverbs, wise words, and stuff which is very useful for you, which you forget, you know, after a few days. Okay, so what we're going to build here is an application which will allow us to save these codes, proverbs and stuff, and it allows us to save these, and it sends us one quote, one proverb every day via email or other methods. Okay, so that's what we're going to build. It's a very simple application. It's going to allow us to create codes and manage codes, and it's going to send us an email every day, and it's going to remind us of one code every day. Okay, so that way we keep remembering these things, and they help make us better. All right. Awesome. So our gem install has bundle install has finished. Now let's look at ls, and there is an Iroh folder there, and there's also a workspace folder. So I'm gonna remove that workspace directory, and let me do an rmrf workspace, and we will move the Iroh directory to workspace. Okay, we'll call it workspace. All right. So this is just a way in which Code9 works. So Cloud9 works. So that's if you're following this on your computer, local computer, you don't have to do this. All right. So now we have our application set up, and whenever you start an application, a very good thing to do is create a to-do file. Okay, so this file can contain the list of things which you want to build in your application. Okay, so let's write down the things we want in our application one by one. Okay, so first, since this is going to be a web application, and I want anyone who has an email ID to be able to use this application. So so let's document what we want this application to do. Okay, so the first thing is we're going to say a user should be able to create an account with an email. Okay, that's the first thing. And the second thing is actually let's say this is the first thing. Okay, so the first thing is a user should be able to add a quote. Okay, so this is something, a quote is something which a user should be able to add. And the next important thing is a user should receive an email with the code every day. Okay, so these are the two most important things. Okay, and we'll get to this in maybe version 2. All right, so in version 1 we're going to say a user should be able to add a code, and a user should be able to receive an email with the code every day. Okay, okay, so now what does a code have? A code, if you think about it, just has some text, right? It has some text, and that's it, right? So okay, so let's get started. Okay, now Rails is a framework which is built around the concept of around the design pattern called MVC. Okay, so which means Rails has these things called models, views, controllers, and actually another thing called the router. Okay, so let's take a step back and try and understand how Rails works. Okay, so Rails is a software, right? Rails is what you're building, your web application, is a piece of software, right? And when you put your software, your web application on the internet, it's going to listen for incoming requests on a specific computer's port. Okay, so whenever a user requests something from a Rails application, the first thing it hits is something called a router. Okay, so this is the guy who gets a request and routes it to the proper controller. Okay, so this is the guy who's directing traffic. Okay, saying, you need to go, or so that you can think of this guy as the receptionist. Okay, at 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 a mall or a store, whatever. So what this guy is going to do is this guy's going to look at what you're requesting and say, hey, you need to be routed to this controller. So it then sends the request to something called a controller. Okay, now this controller is a guy who knows how to handle a request. Okay, so this guy is going to take the request. Okay, so this guy is going to take the request and use the model. So use the model and render a view. Okay, and hand it back to the client. Okay, all right, so these are a bit abstract things. Okay, so let's get back to these once we have something working. Okay, so let's actually start our Rails application. So we need to go to our terminal. Whenever I say terminal, you need to remember that this is the terminal, okay, where you can run commands. Okay, and so the Rails web server can be started by running the Rails server command from inside the directory where the Rails application is present. So the Rails application here is present in this directory, in the workspace directory. So from here, when I type Rails server, it says it's going to start a web server here. Okay, and it says it's starting to listen at this particular port. Okay, so now you can click on this preview button, and what it's going to do is, so if I click on the preview in preview running application button, it's going to open a browser pane inside of the same window. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to get this URL. So I'm going to copy that URL, close this, and open it in a different window. Okay, so I think I didn't copy it properly. So let's copy this. All right, so awesome. So we could actually click on this button, pop out onto a new window, and that has opened it in a new window. Okay, so in a different tab. Now, if you look at the error, it's actually a page which says there is an error on your on your application in your application. Okay, it says I cannot connect to the PostgreSQL database. Now, every Rails application has some kind of a database. Okay, so a database is something which allows you to store data. Okay, so now in our case, we want to store all the codes which the user creates somewhere, right? Now that's where a database is useful. So this is like your notebook where you write your notes. Okay, so it allows you to save data. So that's what the database is, and we'll look at it in more detail in a later session. But for now, what this says is your database is not working, right? So let's actually see if PostgreSQL is installed on this computer. Okay, so you can actually, there are a bunch of ways to do this, but if you run the psql command, it should tell you if PostgreSQL is installed. So it's actually throwing an error. It says is the server running locally? So it says it was unable to connect. So most probably our PostgreSQL server is installed but has not started. So let's try to start it by running this command, and this will probably fail because we need to run that command with sudo. Okay, so we'll look at what sudo is in a later session, but you can run this, and now it's starting our database. So this would happen only once. I mean, if you run into this error, it's not something which you often run into. Okay, so now our application is our database server is up. Let me refresh this page, and now it says database Iroh development does not exist. Okay, so that's good. We're making progress. Now, what we need to do whenever we create a Rails application is we also need to create a database. Okay, so there is a command for that called Rails uh, Rails db :create. Okay, when you run this command, it's going to create a database. Okay, and it failed for some reason. Let's look at the error. It says PG invalid parameter value. Uh, use the same encoding. So I have not run into this error before, and it. So let's. So yeah, you will run into a lot of errors while building applications, and the best way to debug it is first read and see if you've seen this kind of an error before. And I haven't seen this kind of an error before, so I'm gonna copy that error and run it through Google and look at the first hit. So, so again, this seems to be PostgreSQL configuration issue, and the solution here says you need to update PG database and drop the database, create the database. Okay, so let's run these commands one by one, and so this is this is getting very intense for a first session, but let's keep running through this and fix this issue. Whoa. Okay, so somehow I closed the C9 terminal. So anyway, so I'm just opening that back, and once it's open, I can log into the database and run those commands. Okay, so all right, so let's go back to the terminal and run psql and paste that command which we copied from here. So let me copy and paste it. So for some reason paste is not working. Oh yeah, I'm trying Control Shift V, and this is you can use Control V to paste. Okay, so we did that. So here what we're doing in a sense is we are dropping a database, a template database, and recreating it with the proper encoding. Okay, so let's run this, and this, and this, and these two commands. All right, so we're almost there. Awesome. So we've executed all those commands. Let's go back and run the Rails db create command. So this should run. If it is successful, it has created two databases, one for development, one for test. Okay, so that's awesome. We now have a database, and now if we refresh our application, we should see a very nice welcome page. Awesome. All right, so this is the Rails welcome page. It's very nice, good looking, but Anyway, so let's get back to our application. Okay, so we have a working web application up and running. You can give this URL to anyone you want, and they will be able to access this web application. Okay, all right. So before we do anything, let's do a quick hello world because we didn't do that. So uh, let's quickly go back to our to do and see. So actually, I'm using this to even put notes. So if we see here, it says that the entry point is the router and then the controller, right? So let's create a controller. Let's create a controller here. So I'm gonna say new file, and let's name it page controller. Okay, so Rails has this thing called convention over configuration. Okay, which means you need to name things a specific way for it to work properly. Okay, so every controller, the file name has to be the name of the controller underscore the word controller dot rb. Okay, so dot rb stands for the Ruby extension, and this so a page controller is just a class. Okay, so it's a class called page controller, and all it has to do is it has to inherit from application controller. Okay, so it actually has to inherit from action controller, but so for our application, it can inherit from something called application controller. Okay, and we'll see what inheritance is in a bit. Okay, maybe actually in a later session, but here we have something called page controller, and we are going to create a page called a function here called welcome, and so this is a controller with a method. So let's take a step back. If you know Ruby, this is a simple class which inherits from a specific class called application controller, and it has a method called welcome, which doesn't have anything inside of it. Okay, so that's all there is here. Okay, now let's create something called a view. So what we need to do here is we actually need to create a folder here called page. So this has to match the name of the controller. Okay, and we also need to create a file here called welcome.html.erb. Okay, and here we'll put hello world in a pair of h1 tags. Okay, so now we have a controller and a view. Let's go to the router because the router is what controls the traffic, and the router is available in the config folder. In the config folder there is a file called routes.rb where we need to put our route. Okay, and here we're going to say whenever there is a get request to slash send that user to the page controller welcome method. Okay, so what we are doing here is we're saying whenever a user tries to come to the slash URL, send him to the page controller's welcome method. Okay, so methods and controllers are actually called actions. Okay, so here this class is called a controller. Okay, and this method is called an action. Okay, anyway, so what we've done is we've created the page controller, we've created a welcome HTML view, and we've added this line inside of that controller, I'm sorry, the router. And now after this, if I refresh this page, you should see a hello world h1. Awesome, right? So how cool is that? So now if you look at this page, it says hello world, and what's happening here is when the user goes to the slash URL, which is the default URL, right? So here there is a slash, there is an implicit slash. When you do that, the router says, all right, I'm getting a request for slash, and I'm going to send the user to the page controller and the welcome action. So this guy is sending the user to the page controller's welcome action. And since there's nothing here, what what's going to happen is it's going to render a view called the page welcome.html view. Okay, so that's what's happening in this flow. Okay, so we'll actually stop right here and take it from here in the next session. Get your application set up and play around with Cloud9, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. So have a great day. Bye.